my dear friend group gave me a part of themselves to want support. Yeah, specifically that it'd be raw on stage with me, so compliance. My name is Chloe Johnson, as I've already told you guys, and you got to get to know me a little bit on the fun side, but this is the part where we're going to get a little more serious, because we call this Thursday Night Live Comedy with a Purpose, and the purpose is that you all get to hear about the goodness of God. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life and my story and how God's been a part of it. So I think I'm going to start with my childhood, and the best phrase that can encompass my childhood is the only consistency that I ever knew was inconsistency. That was the only thing that was guaranteed to be consistent, is that it was going to be inconsistent. So much so that the first 4 years of my life were spent bouncing back and forth between New Jersey and Kentucky. And my father and his side of the family still lives in New Jersey. And my mom, my brother, my sister, and myself just bounced around a lot as she tried to navigate what it looked like being a single mom raising 3 children. So sometimes we were living with my grandparents in their home, and other times we were bouncing from different apartment complexes. And there was never a time in my elementary school years that I got to spend more than about a year and a half max in the same school or in the same house. That's just not what my childhood looked like. So that's a little difficult to grow up in. And it only got harder when I was about 9. Things started to get a little wonky with my mom. And I noticed some things were off, and I had to grow up really quickly. And I remember preparing meals and doing laundry and getting myself and my siblings ready for school before the bus took off because Mom either wasn't there or she was passed out. And that went on for a couple of years, and my mom and I had a shaky relationship because of it. And then when I was 11, my grandparents came and they took myself, my brother, and my sister in to live with them, and my mom went to rehab. Turns out she was addicted to drugs, and she also had a lot of mental health issues. So my mom wasn't better until my freshman year of high school, and at that point she was well enough to be able to take my siblings and I back in to live with her. And I became somewhat of an only child because I chose to stay with my grandparents. I was acclimated there, I was comfortable there, I loved it, and I knew my place and I knew my friends and I felt comfortable, and finally I had stability and consistency and I wasn't ready to leave it. But I lost the only other constant that I ever knew, my siblings, and having them around. So they moved in with my mom and my stepdad across the river in Ohio, and they still live with her, they still live with them, and I see them sometimes, like family events and stuff, and we saw each other on weekends, but that was really the hardest part of my high school career. It wasn't difficult, it wasn't bad. I was a stereotypical good kid, AP honor roll, Dean's List sometimes. I was in marching band, just a good kid. I didn't go to any parties. I went to this thing called Young Life, which is basically, it's kind of like a BCM, but for like high school kids. And what I didn't mention before is that I was actually baptized when I was 7, which to me, all that meant was that I got to go get dunked in a big tank of water at the front of the church with everyone watching. Literally did not mean anything to me. I had all of the head knowledge about Jesus, and all my life I just gained more and more and more. And I could tell you Bible stories, I went on mission trips, but I always had this hole in my heart, kind of a void in my life. And I thought for the longest time that it was there for my earthly father. No, it wasn't, and much later in my life I found that it belonged to my Heavenly Father, and that void was there because I wasn't letting Him fill it. I wasn't letting Him fill and complete me. So after I graduated high school, that summer, my uncle had a heart attack that hospitalized him. And there were no answers. He was in the hospital that entire summer for months with just confusion and answers, and he was my best friend. So what that summer looked like for me was every single night spent in the hospital room with my uncle, playing Rummy or playing War, or playing Yahtzee, or watching the Batman movies, or MASH was one of his favorite shows. And I cherished those nights. I didn't feel like I missed out on anything. I would leave the hospital at like 2 p.m., go shower, eat, hang out with whatever friends I wanted to hang out with that day, and I always wanted to be back there by like 11 or 11:30 to spend time with my uncle. And so when I left for college, he was still in the hospital, and we still didn't have any answers, and I was just confused, and I was like, okay, like, what's going on here? But at the same time, I got some good news, and my friend Katie, who I had been in color guard with, was in remission from leukemia. So we had a big party as we left. And on one side of the equation, I was really happy for Katie. And on the other side, I was really confused about my uncle. And these are two people who both loved Jesus. They both had relationships with him. And so in my confusion and lack of relationship and only having knowledge of Jesus, I just questioned everything. And I questioned, how do you choose who gets healed? How do you choose who doesn't? And so going into my freshman year, my first semester of college, I was just confused, and I decided I wasn't really going to mess with God that much. And I didn't have my parents or my grandparents around telling me that I needed to go to church. They never go to church, by the way. They just believed that every time the doors were open, the kids needed to be at church. But they weren't around to tell me that I needed to do that anymore. And I had all of this freedom, and I was confused about it anyway. So I did what a lot of college students do their first year in college, and I partied from like Thursday nights to Sunday mornings. I was at some kind of party. It was a fraternity party or a sports mixer, whatever. And then one night in October, we had a home football game here. And it was us playing Morehead State. And the guys from a fraternity that my friends and I frequented often were having a joint mixer at their frat house, which meant that they were inviting the guys from Morehead State's chapter to come to the party as well. We're like, oh, okay, like that would be fun, let's go. So we went, and what ended up happening was I got terribly inebriated, and my friends were sent home by two guys who told them that they sent me home with a designated driver, and my actual designated driver was sent home by being told that I had been sent home with my friends, and I was sexually assaulted by both of those guys. And I would love to say that after that happened, that I completely abandoned the party scene, and I said, hey, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. But the opposite is true, because if I'm being 100% candid with you guys, I struggle with pride, and that presents itself as me being a fixer. So it means that I don't like to tell anyone about problems that I'm going through, but I'll tell you about them after I've gone through it and fixed it. It's never fixed, it's still there, but it's just healed enough and not on the surface enough that I feel like I can tell you about it. So I'll tell you after the fact. And that led me to just a period of misery. I wasn't telling my friends what happened to me because I was pretending like it didn't happen to me. And my pride said, you know, no one needs to know this. That makes you weak. That makes you look weak. You don't have to be weak. And I was just incredibly lonely and incredibly sad and in a horrible, horrible place for months. And I was still partying because that was an escape. And I drank more because that was an escape. And I didn't think about anything. And God was the furthest thing from my mind. And then December 7th, 2014, I get a phone call from my grandma. And she says, Chloe, are you sitting down? So I sat down and said yes. And she said, Katie, who was my friend who was in remission when I went to college, passed away this morning. She unfortunately lost her battle to leukemia. And I just remember cursing God with everything that was in my body, every fiber of my being, every part of my soul. I cursed God for all His word. And I said, listen, there are two realities at work right now. The first one is that you never existed to begin with, and you're a facet of our imaginations that we made up because it's more palatable to tell someone that someone they loved went to a better place, or that God's taking care of a hard situation that we don't want to deal with. Sounds better if there's a God, right? And I said, second reality is you do exist, and if that's the truth, then I'm telling you now, I want nothing to do with you, because you're cruel and you're evil and you don't love like people think that you love, because you just took the life of this beautiful girl before she saw her 18th birthday. You took her away from her family and her friends before she ever got to know love, before she ever got to graduate high school, before she ever got to get married or to have children. And I just sat there and I cursed him up and down for everything that he was worth. And with the same breath that he gave me, that I was cursing him with, he loved me enough to overwhelm me with the most beautiful feeling of peace that I have ever known in my life. And it felt like I was just wrapped in the heaviest, warmest, weighted blanket that you've ever been in. And he told me to test him. And for anyone who knows me, if you tell me to test you, or if you ask for a test, it's kind of like saying, bet. And so God said, test me in this. And I decided, okay, God, like, you know what? I know enough about you. I'm going to give this a try. Because he told me that I knew about him, but I didn't know him. And he revealed that truth to me. So I decided on December 7th, 2014, the day that I lost a close friend, I was going to gain a new life. And I fully surrendered to God and chose to accept the truth of the gospel. If you don't know what that means that our God loved us so much that he sent the only son he ever had to this earth to live as a man and to never sin, which means just never disobey God, and to die on a cross, a sinner's death that I was meant to die, to be buried, and to rise again 3 days later, so that I could have an intimate relationship with the creator of the universe. That's what the gospel is, and that's what I chose to believe. And ever since I chose to believe that and to fully surrender my life to God and just let him take control and stop trying to control it for myself, my life has been radically different. I'm not here to say that I'm perfect. I'm not. I'm a work in progress every day. If I'm not dead, God's not done. Always progressing, always moving forward, always working. And there's always something that he's going to have me growing in. But just seeing the changes, seeing the difference. Life with God just means that even when I'm not happy, I can have joy. And it's a joy that's never fleeting, and it's a joy that can't be taken from you. No one gets to take your joy in Christ because it's in Christ and it's in the cross. And my uncle ended up passing away from leukemia that following May, right after I had lost my friend Katie to the same thing. But the difference is that I have that joy now. And so instead of cursing God for everything he was worth, I praised him for everything that he was. Because my uncle also loved God and had a relationship with him. So I knew that our prayers had been answered better than we ever could have imagined. And God took my uncle home and took him to a place where he would no longer know pain. He would no longer know suffering. So our prayers for healing, in an earthly manner, looked like him getting out of the hospital. But God has a much bigger vision and a much better vision than we ever do. And to God, it looked like taking him out of suffering and pain forever. And I was able to praise him in that because I knew him. And today, what does joy look like in my life today? Well, it looks exactly how most of you know me as being. Most of you probably look at me and see usually an energetic, happy-go-lucky, happy all the time, extroverted girl, right? If you actually know me, if you're one of my intimate, close people, you would know that that's not the case. And that hasn't been the case since about late July. And I've been struggling really hard with depression. And some days I don't have the strength to get myself out of bed. And on those days, there's only one set of footprints in the sand because my Savior is carrying me. And those are his footprints. Because when I don't have the strength to do it, the one who I put all of my joy and faith in does. And he carries me through it. And so he's still working on me. And it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows when you give your life to Christ. It's just not. But it is going to be a life full of joy that is unclean, and joy that cannot be stolen from you. And that joy presents itself in the way that I live my life. And that's why most of you see me as being this girl who's always happy. It's not happiness, it's joy. It's God. And I want nothing more than for everyone in this room to have that joy. And to have something that can't be stolen from them like that. The lock to my chains was Jesus Christ. And it's the same key that can open and lock on your chains too. If you have any questions about any of that, please talk to me. Please talk to any of the leadership here at the VCM. We would love more than anything to talk to you about that. Because I want nothing more than for everyone to have an unfleeting joy. Let me pray for us. Dear God and Heavenly Father, you are so good to us. You are better than anything that we could ever fathom. You are more than we could ever begin to pray for. And you are more than we'll ever deserve. Thank you for your sacrifice on the cross. Thank you for everything you do for us daily. Thank you for the small blessings that we take for granted every day, God. Thank you for waking us up and for bringing us here. And I pray, God, that someone here tonight needed to hear the gospel, God, and they needed to hear your word. And I just pray that that person would be whole and that they would reach out to someone who they know and trust here at BCM, and they would just grasp that joy that cannot be taken, God. And I pray for everyone in here who does know you, Lord, that they would hold on to that joy. And that when the days get bad and the going gets rough, God, that they don't submit to the world. And that they don't let the world get them down, but instead they know that the victory is in you. And it doesn't matter how hard the world is for us, because you've overcome the world. God, I pray that we would all be able to hold on to that truth and meditate on it daily. And I thank you for everyone in this room. For in your son Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all so much for coming to TNL.